All right, friends, welcome to the Kirk and Bill show. We will assume that we'll get a few live viewers. We're doing this at a different time today at 1 o'clock. And that's not to mix things up, but we're just trying to work with our odd schedules and want to, come when we can and when it's great for you. But until we get through this COVID-19 pandemic, we're working from home. Bill is at least, and I'm working from my office and trying to get everything up and running. So, welcome to the Kirk and Bill show. I'm excited to be here today. Today, we're talking about a couple different things. Oop, I'm hearing a little feedback.
That was me.
Oh,
Sorry.
sorry about that. That's okay. Today, we're going to talk about a couple different things. Mainly, we have a little bit longer to hang out at home, at least until the legislature reins in some powers or something like that. But we'll talk about that. We're going to talk about school being canceled. We're going to talk about small businesses in town and how they can survive through this and how to stay positive in this pandemic. So, Bill, thanks for being here today. How are you today?
Well, I'm okay. Yesterday, when the stay-at-home order got extended, I will be very honest and say that I sent many text messages out, and some of them had maybe a wee bit of profanity interwoven in them. And people that normally wouldn't use profanity sent the same ones back. I think there just was a little bit of shock yesterday when that went through. But it is what it is, and we have to deal with it. So, you talk about staying positive, and the number one thing that I can think of to stay positive is try to continue to smile. Because when you actually smile, it brings your positivity up, and not like a fake smile, like
Grit your teeth, yeah.
but actually smiling. So, there's good news and bad news and everything, right? The bad news is that school's done in Wisconsin. I don't think it's officially done in Minnesota. I have a buddy who lives in Iowa who just sent me a text that said Iowa school's done for the year. I'm going to assume that Minnesota is probably going to be canceled today. Governor Walz is speaking, I think, at 2 to kind of give an update. But the governor of Wisconsin gave the update yesterday. We're staying home till the 24th of May. So
I think it's actually the 26th, not to
is it
burst
the 26th?
It was
Yeah,
the
it's Monday.
24th
It's
of
Monday.
April. But now
it's
it's
Monday the 26th,
yeah.
right?
So
which I think is Memorial Day.
I think it's either the day after Memorial Day or the day of Memorial Day. So
whatever.
It's it's going to be one of those things that we are going to see kind of morph throughout the next coming couple weeks as the legislature digests that. Because
there's questions as to whether these executive powers that you can kind of unilaterally declare these things have 60 days limit on them, and that is between May 8th and 11th, depending upon when they actually were enacted, is right. What I've read and heard. I don't know if you've heard anything different than that.
Nope, that's the date that I've had was the 11th. But there's also there's also powers that the legislature has that they can pull back some things,
right?
And so. We may see that as well. I get email updates from different representatives, and they trying to update some things. But quite frankly, right now everybody has turned to sending out updates through emails, and it's hard to keep up with that. so
right.
It's a very difficult,
especially when things change often, and they get written all the time. One piece of news that I found interesting is that the WIAA, the body that handles athletics at the high school level for the state of Wisconsin, they have not pulled the plug yet on the spring sports season. Now, they meet on the 21st, so being a coach, I'm hopeful that they're going to figure out some way to have some sort of athletic events here in the spring. But, man, I think it's probably all but done that they're going to come on and say, yeah, well, since we can't have one of the 10 people get together, we can't have a track meet or a baseball game or softball, and then I'll just be done. So
yeah, it's interesting. I was talking yesterday with an individual who I hope to have on our show. I'm not going to mention names yet, but he's a pretty important person to the potential growth of St. Croix Falls. and
Right.
to the city. And Bill's familiar with this individual. And the statement that I heard was that he would not be shocked, and he would know because he's in the field of building and producing and things like that. If there were new kind of ADA rules that were put
Right.
in place for compliance that took into effect this whole pandemic, as far as how many people you can have in a space, and whether or not that'll make it difficult for businesses to succeed. But when you talk about sports, last night, I don't know if you had a chance to watch the replay. It was kind of
Yeah.
live, but it was a replay of a great meeting that some local coaches from St. Croix Falls and a local church put on with Kirk Cousins from the Minnesota Vikings. And it was funny because one of the wrestling coaches made the statement that he's so desperate for any sports that he'd be willing to watch. I think he said a golf tournament and a tennis match, which got a chuckle because that's probably not his forte. But I think if we don't see some sports pretty soon, um, we'll be watching replays before that show came on with Kirk Cousins. Um,
Right.
I was just trying to keep my kids entertained, so we threw out a Facebook channel and found replays of the All-Star game, and we watched about a half hour of that. And that was, how many years ago? I have no idea, but Kate at least got to watch a little bit of sports. Um, that was kind of fun. So uh, we've got some people that have some questions and things that we're definitely going to get to. So stay tuned for that. Um, One of the things that we wanted to do is talk about some of the loans that are out there
Right.
and things like that. So, Bill, do you have anything on your agenda that you want to hit first, or do you want to hit some
Yeah.
of these questions? Or
I'll jump in right away, and I just want to give 2 cents about Kirk Cousins hopping on last night and talking to some local coaches here. He was wearing a St. Croix Falls shirt. Um,
yeah,
it was pretty cool. Whether you no matter what you think about his style of playing football and how much his contract is with the Vikings and whether they should have extended him or not, uh, as a person, to take the time, take an hour out of his life to talk directly to the student athletes and our community. It's pretty stinking awesome. So that being said, that's the best news that I have is that Kirk Cousins is an awesome human being, and I'm thankful that he took the time out. Here's the bad news: the loans that we've been talking about, the EIDL and the PPP, the money that was allocated for those is gone. 300, it's more than $350 billion between the two of them. And it was somewhere in the range of April 10th or 11th. If you had an application in by then, you could have got your money. But now there's certainly thousands of applications that just aren't going to be funded. So what does that mean? That means I would still encourage you to apply, talk to your bank if you need the money. It is likely at some point, hopefully in the near future, that Congress will just approve more funds. There was a $250 billion clean bill that the Senate wanted to vote on. I'm going to do my best to not get political here today because
sure.
I want people to stay engaged. But at the federal level, everyone is playing politics right now. And people are taking their sides and they're jostling and they're kind of playing a game of chicken. And quite frankly, it's garbage. The government has forced businesses to shut down. They should at least be funding these loan products. So my hope is that over the next week, we'll see another 250, $300 billion. We're just saying that like it's nothing, $billion. Will be loaded
Rolls off your
into that.
tongue.
It's just simple. I mean, there's going to be another $1 trillion stimulus package that's coming. There's 22 million unemployed Americans right now.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't do too many weeks of pushing money out to do that. So I'm just telling everybody, just keep applying. If you didn't get the money, I know a lot of businesses have. If you were early to apply and you had your stuff together, businesses are getting funded.
Yeah.
They are getting the money and they're getting it quickly. So it's just that it was gone. Like the demand was underestimated.
And it seems like there was a delay for certain size businesses to put in an application. Is that correct? That if you were a smaller business, you had to wait a little bit longer, or Because I think some
Right.
of the
Well,
bigger
there was
businesses
two.
got their
Right.
loans.
There was two timelines. If you were if you are a business that has if you're just a sole proprietor, you had to wait until the 10th of April to apply, and that meant almost all of them. You didn't have very many days after that, and the money was gone.
Right.
So if you were a corporation or LLC that has employees, has a payroll service, and you could pull all the reports, and you had already filed your taxes, you can pull all of it and put it together. Then your application got to the front. There was also problems with the banks communicating with the SBA, and the rules didn't get rolled out right away. And when you look back at it, you go, they actually turned this on pretty fast, but it feels like it's absolutely taking forever because so many thousands of small businesses are just shut down right now or are operating at 20 or 30% of revenue of what they normally do. They're doing whatever, restaurants, whatever they can do, takeout, retail, whatever you can do online. And a lot of retail, some of it can't be done online. Some of it has to be people shopping. So it's creepy. And then you talk about bigger businesses. There's kind of some carve outs for franchise businesses that instead of looking at it, like a restaurant, there was a steakhouse that had hundreds of chains in their franchise. So each individual restaurant qualified for the PPP. Well, their corporate got everybody lined up. So they got millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars, which, they're franchisees, but that's a little bit kind of, there's carve outs always in these programs, unfortunately.
Yeah. We were talking earlier, and there was a blog that a small business person wrote that talked about Ruth's Chris Steakhouse getting $20 million.
Right. Yep.
And when you have a limited supply of money, that's a lot of money. But for the number of employees they had, that's probably where they should have been. I would have loved to have seen the small businesses, because everybody I've talked to tends to be in that smaller portion,
right.
1 to 5 employees or just themselves. And I haven't heard anybody say, yes, I got something.
Those specific businesses are the ones that are getting absolutely wiped out right now.
Right. And
because
they're the ones that are really struggling with,
right.
They're not necessarily paying their 5 employees, but they're losing out on their own mortgage.
Well, an easy, you can think of a couple of things. Easy hairstylists, whether you rent a chair somewhere or you are out of your house or wherever. If you are renting, you're shut down.
Yeah.
And that's you're not just like shut down, like you can't do your service, so you have no money coming in. And if that's where your livelihood is, you're in trouble, and it's heartbreaking. On Wednesday, I had the first interaction with one of my actual clients that I advise, and came to the conclusion that they have to move towards meeting with a bankruptcy attorney to begin the process of liquidating their business. They're probably going to have to declare personal bankruptcy as well to shield themselves. They're going to lose their house probably, and they're probably going to lose their life savings. Wow. That is a real family that is relatively local, that is right here, and that is the kind of thing that, unfortunately, because we are trying to manage this COVID-19 virus, certain companies are going to be wiped out, and lives will be altered economically.
And I think that's pretty standard for a beginning starter business or a family business, that you invest your own capital, you invest a lot of sweat equity. You don't have angel investors that are putting forth $1 million. You pull up the boots and you start working, whether it's a family farm or a hardware store that you started from scratch. Those are things that you invest your own money into, and you put the risk on yourself so that, in good times that works out, but then when you fall into these harder times, then you lose out, and that's going to be a tough thing to swallow.
You just try as you might. We've talked about pivoting or leveling up, but if there just is no income coming in, and their problem was there wasn't going to be income coming in for a couple months on the other end, because they were going to be one of the last industries to open up, even if the economy moves towards this tiered opening that the federal government released last night. President Trump kind of talked about a 3-phase opening,
Mm-hmm.
and give you kind of the rough rundown of that. And we'll link to all this stuff on our Facebook page. So if I say a wrong number here or there, please in the comments be kind. But essentially, what the federal recommendations and the federal guidelines are looking at would be, first of all, it's at a governor's discretion. It's at the governor's or the state's discretion of when they actually open back up. The president can't just unilaterally open things back up. We are a constitutional republic. We are not a true democracy. The president doesn't have that sort of power. Thankfully, I think we can all say we're glad that one person isn't making these decisions. So now it comes down to Wisconsin, Minnesota, Washington, New York, wherever you're at. The governors, many of them have powers in a state of an emergency. Wisconsin is one of those states. So the governor or the governor and the legislatures, whichever, however it is, they can either adopt these guidelines, they can come up with their own guidelines, but the federal guidelines are this. Essentially, it's 14 days of everything related to the COVID virus needs to be in a trend that's decreasing. So you have to be testing the same or more amount of people than you normally are. And the amount of people testing positive needs to be trending down. The amount of hospitalization needs to be trending down. ICU needs to be trending down, and deaths need to be trending down for 14 days. So that's kind of that's the first step. The second step is that hospitals, in whatever geographic area you're talking about, have to have the capacity to treat all the patients that they have without being into crisis or surge capacity. And then you also have to be able to have enough testing happening in your geographic location that you can make sure people that are sick get a test, and then they can quarantine themselves. So that kind of is, once those things are hit for 14 days, you kind of get to a phase 1 opening. But if you look at phase 1, that's pretty close to where we are now in Wisconsin. It's like 10 people. You can still go outside. Restaurants still aren't open for seating. Sports still aren't going. Big venues, theaters, that sort of thing aren't going good. But then the federal guidelines say if another 14 days passes, so now we're at 28 days. If you have 28 days of this, 14 days pass, 14 more days pass, then we get to phase 2, and that's actually where things open up quite a bit. And you are getting, school could go back in session at that point, and a number of other businesses open up, and you could have limited seating in restaurants and so on. And then another 14 days, and then it essentially all opens up except for people that are super vulnerable. Talk about your long-term care facilities, people that are immune compromised, they still would be encouraged to be locked down. So that's kind of the roadmap from a federal perspective. But again, the states have to adopt that.
And the governors have some flexibility with that. Obviously, the president said, "Hey, we are not going to dictate to the states. There's the states have rights and their own leadership, and so that's perfect." And so that kind of answers Shannon's question about overruling
Right.
the decision made to extend to May 26. Now, could it have been outlaid a little bit clearer and less scary for people, or less frustrating for people? I had a discussion with my wife, and I think if there was a little bit better communication from the governor's office on why you're doing this, it would have been a lot less stressful for people. It's a known fact that people read headlines and they don't read the story very often. So when I saw that headline, I was, my first thing is, another till the 26th. It was blood boiling. But as you read inside, there are relieving some things over a period of time.
Hey, golf courses are opening. I mean,
Right.
There's more. If you're a golfer, you can go golfing now, but you can't go in the clubhouse, and you can't share a cart, and you can't touch each other.
Right. Well,
that sounded weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
See, you're smiling.
Yeah,
Kirk.
I'm
You're
smiling.
It's okay.
I don't play golf other than miniature golf, so that's probably not going to help me out. But the point is we need to hear communication from our leaders, and whether we like our leaders or not, whether we are a Democrat or a Republican, an independent, we need to hear from the people that are our leaders. And so it's nice to have regular press conferences, but we need to know the numbers. We need to have the statistics. We need to know how many people are sick and how many people are better, so that we can make some of those judgments. And that's where I think we've missed out on quite a bit of opportunities to just cool people's heads. Because right now, I've been invited to recall our governor. I've seen Minnesota's trying to recall. I mean, there's people that are protesting and angry, and we need to cool down and relax a little bit
Right.
and start thinking
Right.
through
I
things.
when I shared the post yesterday on Facebook, I believe I said I hope cooler heads will prevail,
Right.
because when I take the temperature of what's going on kind of in our local community, and you look at in Michigan, they kind of a whole bunch of cars clogged, Lansing, and then North Carolina had this huge protest. You just don't want it to get to a point where people are thinking that they have no options, or that this is never going to end, because civil unrest is very real. Mob mentality can be very real, and that doesn't benefit anybody.
Right.
So we have to get that. I'm going to go a step further with you and advise the governor of Wisconsin to fire his communications team, because they're doing him a great disservice by the prepared remarks. Now, I know politicians generally don't write their own statements. They have teams that do that. But he needs to fire them all and say, we need to get some clear communication. Because if he would have said, if when we get to this level, this percentage, we need to get to this in order for the public health officials say we need to be at this rate, this rate of decrease in death or hospitalizations or whatever, before we can start opening up, then everyone would know, and we could pay attention to the numbers, and we could set a goal and say, okay, we can buckle down and we'll show social distance.
Yeah.
I believe his exact phrase was, we need to do this a bit longer. A bit longer is not a defined amount of time.
Well,
And a bit longer to me was not 40 days.
right
40 days
now,
is like an eternity.
we are the longest one. Now we'll see what Minnesota and other communities do, but we're the longest stay in place order out there. And it'll be interesting to see what Minnesota does, because as much as we're in Wisconsin, I'm more concerned with Minneapolis,
right,
because that's where
right,
people are coming to visit from.
right.
And so their stay-at-home orders coming to a close in May 3rd or somewhere right around there, May 4th.
Yeah, I think it's 3 Fridays or something like that.
So
I know, and that's if you're looking at the vast majority of cases percentage-wise are in Milwaukee and Wisconsin, or the Milwaukee metro area, and then Madison being second. In Minnesota, it's all the metro, Minneapolis,
right.
St. Paul metro area, and it's not close anywhere else. The vast majority there, because that's where the people are.
Yeah.
So I guess from my perspective, what I would like to see is, between the legislature, the governor, put a plan together and tell us when we're going to open up. Our businesses need to know that. The other thing is, you can't just, if you've been deemed non-essential or you've had to lay people off, it takes time to get product back in your store.
Yeah.
It takes, your goods that you're going, if you're a manufacturing company, you have to order goods. You're not just, you use up what you had and then you shut down.
Yeah.
If you're a restaurant, you're not buying more food to sit and rot. So you have to wait to get that to kind of wind back up. You have to call your employees back, and it just takes time to do. So it's going to take a ramp up period. It's not, people talk about a light switch. It's not just a light switch. Even if you said go, it's going to take, a couple of weeks to get things fired back up. So,
and
that's
people
just,
are losing heart too. I mean, that's something that we haven't really talked about. And I did see,
it was a sucker punch yesterday, man. It was like,
yeah.
It was like deflating. It was like air coming out of a tire.
Right. For all the parents who are thinking, maybe my kids will get to say goodbye to their kids,
right.
A local family who's been real supportive of me in the last run for mayor. I read I read her post on Facebook about her 5-year-old
right.
daughter, who's just
right.
sad because she's not going to be able to say goodbye to her kids, to her classmates, and how sad that is for her. And, we got to toughen up our kids maybe, but the reality is my kids miss their friends. They miss being in activities. We miss seeing our grandparents and all those things. And the longer that we do that, and the longer that we hold off on getting people together, the more chances that people are
eventually people are just going to say, or they're just going to say, I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
They're, I stayed away long enough. And again, I just don't want to get to that point where where people do that, because then it defeats the whole purpose of why we did it in the first place.
Right.
Is to, if we have this huge, we have a huge spike suddenly in cases, it's just going to go on forever.
Let's take a pause. It's
a tough deal.
Let's see if we can answer a couple questions here.
Yeah.
Casey asked, if the federal government does approve more money for small businesses, do you know if businesses who have already applied are first in line, or would people have to reapply?
No, if once you have applied, because my business is actually one of them that has applied and did not receive money because it was out by when it did that. And the rules of the SBA, banks are going to continue to submit applications. The SBA isn't if the bank has them, they will hold them in line and send them to the SBA when they reopen. If the SBA has the application but the money ran out before they accepted the application, those will continue to be in line. And the guidance is that the banks, keep them sequentially in line. So you will not have to reapply.
Good. Okay. Kelly says, what about tourists still coming to the interstate park, not using social distancing? Are following the guidelines? DNR says they can't do anything about it. At this point, do we have the manpower to enforce social distancing, and how the park congregate in the downtown areas? I think that this is something that is tough, because the state runs the park, and they closed 40 parks, and the park in our area was not closed, which on some level we're excited that we haven't closed everything down.
Right.
But on the other standpoint, we've got a lot of people potentially coming from the cities that are stopping at gas stations along the way, maybe picking up stuff at grocery stores, and then congregating in the park. And so there are some concerns with that. And that's something that, the city needs to reach out, and I, being the new incoming mayor, will be having those discussions with the park and saying, what can we do to manage this better? But it really comes down to personal responsibility.
The short answer, yeah, I agree, Kirk. The short answer is there aren't enough police or
Right.
whatever in the world to handle this, especially in our area where there's, where we're not densely populated. We just don't have the force to do it.
Right.
So,
and I don't think
agree,
that police want to be writing tickets for crossing state lines and things like that.
What I would really like is for people just to pick up their trash. Like I've seen pictures of gloves and garbage and whatever.
Gross.
Just get out, enjoy the air, but just be respectful.
Personal responsibility.
Would you throw gloves in your own yard? No.
Right.
Just don't throw them off the trail, and social distance, give space to other people. Just be respectful of one another. It's not rocket science.
Yeah.
Just do it, man.
I think it really comes down to making decisions that, the golden rule, would you do this to yourself? And if you're not willing to do it to yourself, then don't do it to others. Be kind. Give each other a little bit of space. And we talk about how to be happy. Probably the number one thing I would say to being happy is turning off your phone. Now, don't turn it off yet, because you're watching us maybe on your phone or social media. But
when you get those when you get the announcements on Facebook for the Kirk and Bill show, watch those.
Yeah, the last several weeks, as this has gone on and on, it's become more and more vicious with the comments and the way people cut at each other, and it's always been kind of ugly. But it's very much people are kind of at their wits' end. Jeff Virchow, who is on the city council, said, "All I know is that I have empathy for anyone in a leadership role during a global pandemic. Excuse my French, but you're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. An extremely unenviable position for any governor to be in. Let's give them all a break." And so I agree. I joke with my wife when I was running for mayor, and people would say, "Oh, you're going to run for president, or you're going to run for governor," and I laugh and I go, "I don't want any more responsibility than I already have," because the stress level. There's a reason that president's hair turns gray. within the first term because
Right. Yeah. Right.
they get
You
beat
see
up a
every
lot.
president. You see that picture of the inauguration day, and they all look, full of life. And by the time they're out, it's like,
Yeah.
what are presidents learning about, over their 4 or 8 years? That man.
Yeah, I don't think I'd want to be in a position of that kind of stress. It's enough stress to just try and manage one city, let alone an entire state or country. So I do give the the governor a little leadway. Hopefully, he's listening to the experts. He likes to talk about the science and the experts, and there's a lot of trust that we have to give there. Do I agree with everything that he's done? Absolutely not. But do I think that he's doing what he thinks is best for the state? Yeah, I think that we have to trust that our leaders are going to do what's best for us. And there's an election process, and there's protesting that can happen if you don't agree with it. But we still need to be safe. We still need to manage um, our personal responsibility. It all comes down to that again. If you don't agree with something, fine, but throwing people under the bus is not the way to do that. So,
Well,
um,
I don't want my comments to be, taken the wrong way, but um, we can learn from this that the communication, we can. I want people to be clear to say that, be free to say that the communication has not been good, to be accept that, and not say that, I necessarily hate the governor or whatever. It's just
right,
the communication has not been what I would consider crisp. And yes, it is a pandemic, and it is something where there is no playbook. There isn't, what do we do now? So you're just kind of, everyone is making it up as they go, because you have an unseen, unknown thing that you're trying to fight. And if you have models that are predicting 25,000, 50,000 people dying, you know, hospitals being overrun, yeah, you have to take some pretty drastic measures. But
mm-hmm.
knowing that you're going to take those drastic measures, in my opinion, you better make dang sure that you're communicating them pretty clearly,
Yeah,
to avoid getting to the spot again where um, we're pretty resilient. Us Midwesterners generally takes a lot to get us totally riled up, but we just don't want to get to the point where they're actually a civil unrest, because that does no one any favors, and it does not help our towns, big or small, get through this and get over it.
yeah. Nathan Waterworth says people are missing their church families. It's been a few weeks since we've been to church, and I will concur that
Six
yeah, it's been a long time.
or
It's
five.
interesting. I had a discussion with our sheriff, and he talked about the importance of churches in just a civil society, that the
Correct.
churches kind of allow people that extra amount of faith and resources sometimes, but also just kind of gives a buffer for what he does as sheriff. And he's really plugging that, or, hoping that churches can survive through this without any closing their doors, because without that resource for, law enforcement, social work, counseling, that
Right.
spiritual life, funerals, whatever it may be,
Yeah.
crime tends to go up. And so there's a concern there that it's pretty unprecedented that we can't go to church for 6 weeks. There are a lot of people that are angry that they can't go to church from the standpoint of, these are my rights, and yet, as much as I want to be able to go to church, I would just encourage people to, you know, let this run its course and listen to the experts and make changes through the proper means, whether that's talking to your
Right.
legislators and coming to different
Let them know.
agreements.
Absolutely. Call your elected officials. Let them know your point of view, or ask for more information. Request them to clarify,
Right.
and I think that is the exact right way to go about
Yeah.
it. Express your frustration that way, not through trying to inflame people through social media or otherwise. Man, that's
Don't
just not the way to go.
don't decide you're going to meet and have a big service and find out that later everybody in there has been exposed to something. We will get to that. And like I think you said in one of our previous discussions, after this is all done, there will be a time to look back and sort out the details,
Yeah,
and there will
we
be a
can
blame. There'll be
we
some
can assess
blame.
blame.
You
Right.
know, some people have lost their rights, and there will
Right.
be some
If
civil
if
suits.
if,
And
if civil liberties in areas, and I'm not saying what areas, but if they have been trampled on, that needs to be taken into account.
right,
If people didn't act soon enough, or they acted too long and were overly cautious, there will be repercussions. And when you're an elected official, you get voted out or you get voted in,
yep,
and that's kind of the way it is. And it's a it's one of the beauties of America is that we don't overthrow people. We just vote them out, and the next person comes in, or we keep them in power depending upon the job that they're doing. And it
yep,
just so happens that we're dealing with something that's so strange. It's unseen. You can't defeat it except by doing nothing,
yeah,
which is kind of it's so counter to everything that you're doing. And what you think of going to war, you think of a fight, you think you charge towards something. This, we just got to do nothing. We got to stay away from people,
and
and
I
it's
and
hard.
I, it's not typical American. You know, we are the land of the free. We have rights. You know, we do what we do.
We pride ourselves on busyness, man. Like
Yes,
the most efficiency and the most whatever. I was actually talking to someone the other day, and um, he said, maybe this just is a time to kind of reset and rethink what we do in life and what really matters. And that's maybe there's some truth to that, because I know that I've got to spend more time with my two little girls in the last month, probably than the certainly if you had their lives together. The amount of hours that we've spent playing and actually being together
yeah,
is kind of cool. Now it's frustrating, and I'm not a teacher, and I'm not cut out to be a teacher. So all you parents who are teaching, who are not teachers, I'm with you. A little solidarity there, but it's a hard thing. It just kind of got thrust on us, but there's plenty of good that will eventually come out of this. You will have a chance to reset your life. Whether you look around and go, financially, I don't want to be in a position where if this happens again, that I need to count on the state coming through with unemployment, because you know what? State of Wisconsin is just kind of getting there. They just voted this week
mm-hmm.
to waive the 1 week waiting period for unemployment insurance, and they kind of adopted the other federal things that allow that money to come through. So Wisconsin, I think, wrote down $370 per week is the max unemployment that you can qualify for, and for 13 weeks you get an extra $600 from the feds. That will show up, I think, next week or the week after on those checks. And then starting the week of the 20, maybe the 21st, next week or the week after, those that are 1099 employed that normally wouldn't get a 1099 or sole employers, single proprietors, they can apply for unemployment insurance in Wisconsin as well, and they can get it, and they can get the 600 from the feds for 13 weeks.
And I
So
think that's
at least they'll be able to make whole.
that's a huge point that we need to reiterate, that normally a person would have to be a employee that pays self-employment insurance, or pays unemployment insurance. And what you're saying is that the 1099 employees that are self-employed
Right.
will have an opportunity to receive some of those
Correct.
benefits as well. And
Correct.
there are a lot of small businesses
A lot.
that are run as a 1099 or just as a sole proprietor.
Right.
I'm an LLC, but I still am not an S
Yeah,
corp.
you're a disregarded entity.
That's right.
In the eyes of the IRS.
Yes, and so I think that's really important, because there's a lot of businesses who are sweating right now, saying, "Well, how do I get any benefits, because I can't get the PPP, I can't do unemployment, and we have a mortgage payment." And so that's a really good point to make. Beyond that,
so go on. They finally kind of the legislature got it through. The governor signed it. So there's been an update. I think they're probably working on another package to help as well, but they needed to get this one done. And I'm pretty sure the feds are working on another one too. That'll be at least $1 trillion. So there's going to be more money, but that doesn't stop your payments from coming due.
right.
So
In that instance, from a debt collector perspective, if you are struggling to make your payments, the most important thing that you can do right now is contact that person that you owe money
Right.
to, and let them know. Don't not pay that payment and just ignore it. Call up your bank and say, hey, I'm not going to be able to make these payments. They're going to be a lot more understanding up front and maybe give you an extension or put things on hold that you will have a lot more leadway later to negotiate those things out. If you're not able to make your mortgage payment, call your mortgage lender.
Right.
Let them know. If you just ignore it, then you are going to be seen as delinquent. Whereas if you call ahead of time and
Correct.
say, "Hey, this is where we're at," they will say, "You know what? Maybe we'll just hold it for 30 days or 60 days or whatever." Doesn't mean you're not going to have to make those payments. It just means that they are going to work with you. So go ahead and do that. One of the big concerns that everybody who is a small business owner, and me as a person who is going to be sworn in for mayor on Monday, in our city, we have a lot of small businesses who, if you walk up and down Main Street or up on the hill, who on their door it says closed until further notice. What are some things that small businesses like hair salons and nail, people that do nails, or
Right.
those service industry type things where they're not considered essential? What can they do to stay relevant, to keep their doors open longer? Do you have any advice for them?
I'm going to be honest with you. I don't. If you are, unfortunately, if you are in that service industry, if you are only a sit down restaurant, if you are a nail person or a person that cuts hair, massage therapist, those sorts of things that are close contact,
Mm-hmm.
those are going to be lifted at the end.
Yeah.
My the reality is, my advice is figure out a way to bring income into your household and restart your business when the time is right. Do whatever it
Right.
takes to get money coming in, because I don't see a way that you'll be able to do that. It's just, it's one thing, Governor Evers did in this new order talked about maybe, especially in some retail settings, you could do some curbside stuff now. If you just had one person landscaping or work outside, if there's just one person involved, you can do it. So the rules have loosened just a bit, but
Right.
if you're in that one-on-one, like you're this close to someone's face, that's super high risk anyway.
Yeah.
So I don't have good advice there. My advice is to protect yourself and your family the best that you can. Don't bring the sickness in, and then find, supplement other ways of income, whether it's, Dave Ramsey would say, go deliver pizza, or,
Right.
whatever. Just
Yeah, I think
figure out a way to supplement enough income to keep,
it's not
keep
what you
your
want to
house
tell
on and
someone
your lights on.
who's a self-employed guy or gal, and they have the freedoms that they've always had and have been successful. But in this time, in these extraordinary circumstances, sometimes pride has to be put aside, and you need
It's
to
about survival,
go drive truck. You need to
right?
go stock shelves. You need to do something that will bring in that income.
Amazon hired 100,000 people, and they're hiring 75,000 more.
Yeah, that's because 50,000 had. No, I'm just kidding. I think they had a little outbreak in one of their
Right,
areas.
right. But that's it, and that happened at a Smithfield pork processing facility as well.
Yeah,
So
out of South Dakota.
it's not that, COVID-19 is very real, and it's a dangerous disease, and it can spread very quickly,
Yep.
particularly if you're not distancing, if you're not providing space, you're not sanitizing, you're not washing your hands, you're not wearing a mask. So these things are very important to continue to quash this.
Yeah.
The question just is, how do we? This can't go on forever.
Yeah. So a
Like
couple
we can't for the rest of the year. We can't do this.
couple
There'll be
things.
nothing left of our economy.
Nathan Waterworth says the cure should not be worse than the disease, which is absolutely true. But then we also need to realize that the disease is real, and there's different. That's the problem. We have different opinions on things. You talk to one
Right,
person, and they work in an
right,
ER, and they're seeing people die in ventilators, and
right.
then you talk to someone else who has a different opinion, and then you talk to an expert, and they have an opinion. Nobody totally agrees, and I think Jeff chimed in and he said, keep in mind that over 4,500 people have died from this
Right.
disease in the last 24 hours. in just the USA, and over
I think it's,
35.
I think right now it's the number two cause of death on a daily rate. If you just look at a daily rate in the United States,
Yeah.
that's legitimately concerning.
So we have to look at it from both perspectives. It is a very contagious, highly contagious disease that is
Hmm.
going to cause more havoc on your lungs, and you may end up on a ventilator. And those who get really sick, if they're over a certain age, are may die. And so it's not something to be messed around with. But then the flip side, and there's arguments on both sides, is that we can't allow our economy to be crushed to the point where now everybody's kind of living, but what happens when everything is at zero economic growth, and now we have other diseases and other deaths and other depression and suicide? um, all those things have to be weighed together, and that's what our leaders are
Right,
hopefully going through. But it's a tough decision.
right.
When do we
And I
open up
would, and
and
I
when do we
would,
don't?
and I agree. And I would say that neither keep it shut down indefinitely nor open it all up immediately are even remotely the right
Right.
way to do it. If you we'll post kind of the steps that were laid out by the White House and Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx. They're they have science behind them. It seems like a reasonable blueprint to look at and go, okay, once we hit these lines, and once we hit this level, and things have been tamped down to a point that we can
Right.
begin to open things up in a staged manner,
Yep.
which I think is what most reasonable people are talking about. The governors of Wisconsin, Minnesota, Illinois, Michigan, Kentucky, and somebody else. Ohio. They kind of put a pact together to say we're going to work. We're going to work together to figure out how to kind of do this phased reopening.
Mm-hmm.
And some of it might have to be on a regionalized basis. Where there's less population. Northern Wisconsin may be able to do things a little bit faster than the city of Milwaukee.
Well, and
That's
a good question.
kind of the where things are going, but that's again the legislature and the governor is going to have to figure that
And
out.
and can the governor, does he have the discretion, and I think he does, to allow counties to make a lot of those decisions on their own based on where they are and the population density and those types of things? Or does it have to be a one size fits all solution where Milwaukee's got a lot of bad things going on? So now Polk County on the other side of the state, where people live on farms miles from each other, they have to succumb to those same conclusions. And I don't think that it has to be a one size fit all, but rolling that out would be a tremendous
What I
amount
would
of
right
work.
what I personally would like to see would like to just see the criteria
Mm-hmm.
and that we're going to use, because I think once that criteria is there, and you can pick your geographic, you could quarter the state, you could put it in quarters, or you could
Yeah.
geographically you could split it up, you could do it by county. By municipality would be a disaster because you don't have a coherent strategy. But
No, no.
um, I think it can be done, and I think the experts can work together with the legislatures and the governors and elected officials to put together a plan to say this is the plan that we want to move forward with, and then realize that if things swell up and if this disease starts, in a certain area, it starts to pop up, you're going to have to close things. Things are going to get tightened back up. That's just going to be the nature. That's reality. That's reality. If you
Yeah.
have a flare up, you have to tamp it down.
And
That's
I
it.
think the
Can't run. It
president made
can't
that
run
clear.
unchecked.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
president made that clear that he stated that if they're monitoring things appropriately and they see something firing up in an area, they will come down hard on it because they don't want to see this as a global.
Where the places that got in deep trouble, this virus was running around for a long time,
Right.
unchecked and kind of not knowing what was going on. It was getting spread quickly. And fortunately, we're geographically in the middle of the country, so it came to us slower. New York, San Francisco, Washington, LA, San Francisco, Washington, these ports of, international commerce, it was kind of running around a little bit.
Yeah. Some of the consequences that we're going to face too that we don't even think about because we're enjoying not driving so much and low gas prices. I paid $1.59 for gas, and I think it's even cheaper in Minnesota. But
Under a buck in Lake City, Minnesota, I
yeah,
think is what I heard.
but tax revenue is generated by gas tax, and so one of the repercussions of this,
Gas tax, sales tax.
yeah, we are going to have less money in our state because of the fact that people aren't doing anything. That on top of our economy, and that on top of other things, and so it's a trickle down problem as well as just the reality of less money's coming in, and we're going to suffer from that. Do you have anything, any updates on that you're able to share as far as the hospital or what's going on with healthcare in general? I know that
Right.
you kind of have your pulse on that with your wife being a
Right.
doctor.
I keep up on that pretty tightly. I'm on the board of trustees, and I can't really speak on behalf of SCRMC. But like many other hospitals, St. Croix is not at capacity. If you look at, almost every hospital system from Marshfield to Gunderson to Mayo to, everything in the cities, Lina, Fairview, Health Partners, they're all furloughing staff. They're all, executives are taking cuts in pay. It's just because it's all this preparation and it's a perfect storm. You want to make sure you have the personal protective equipment.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying because it was not stockpiled appropriately, and we can blame whoever for that. We don't know yet, but you don't want to waste that personal protective equipment on non-essential surgeries in anticipation of what is being referred to as the surge. So as the disease progresses and peaks and then comes down, you want to make sure that the people that are fighting the front lines, the physicians and the nurses, have that personal protective equipment. Healthcare workers are hit disproportionately hard by this disease because they're in there face-to-face close with people all the time, working with them when they're the sickest. So there's a very high level when you look at demographics. Healthcare workers get hit hard with this, which is scary. My wife's a healthcare worker, so it's scary when she goes into work that she could be exposed to this.
Has the PPE been solved? Have they got more PPE, gowns, masks, shields? Is that
I
better?
think solved is probably too strong to say, but I believe that if you look at it on a national level, New York didn't need the level of ventilators that I thought it was going to need. I think that the N95 masks that are more like the respirators that fit tight, those sort of masks I think are still in a little bit short supply.
Yeah.
And 3M and other companies are making, they talk about hundreds of millions of them. So it's getting supply chains figured out. That's the other goofy thing. You see farmers dumping milk in their field, and you go to the grocery store and there's no milk on the shelf. And it's just like, there's kind of it's disjointed in the supply chain all over.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you another thing. If the federal government is directing some of where ventilators are going. So I know a hospital in Minnesota had ordered 100, and the federal government just said, nope, they're going to New York.
Right. No,
So
I just saw that New York
there's
sent,
a lot of fingers, in this thing.
Right. I saw New York didn't use theirs, and they sent their extras someplace else too. So
right. And Seattle sent theirs, and so
right.
I'm hopeful that by the time if things do flare up to the point where we have to have that here in the Minneapolis area, that there's enough stockpile now that's been created that we would be okay.
And sometimes we look at certain businesses that are our businesses. Maybe we think of them as nonprofits or something like that, but the hospital is a business. They have
Right.
800 to 1,000 employees, and they have to pay salaries and benefits and
Right.
buy supplies and do all that stuff. And so when you see a busy parking lot of people getting tested for COVID, which they're not really testing for COVID, they're more flu and strep and things like that, but they're screening
Yep.
them. That is not a money-making proposition for a business to do those types of things. And is it accurate to say that the hospitals pretty much stopped all of their non-emergent
Right.
type things.
So elective surgeries. So that could be everything from a hernia repair to you need a new hip to, you want a mole taken off to whatever. If it's an elective process, it's physical therapy. It's a lot of it's routine. Even going into the clinic to get medication, all
Mm-hmm.
of that is there. All of that is being done through telemedicine, if it can be, or else it's being put off until the COVID threat is to a point where it's deemed acceptable to open that back up.
Right.
So it's the hope is that there will be pent up demand. So it'll just be like a valley for a few months where won't be a lot of income coming in, and there'll be pent up demand on the backside. As a lot of healthcare systems are talking about that person that needs a new hip still needs a new hip.
Yeah.
It's just that two people are going to need it in the same day instead of one. And then how do you handle it on the back end to make sure that you can handle that supply? But healthcare is not immune, just like anything else. And you're going to see it's going to continue to ripple through the economy.
Yeah. We want to
until
protect
COVID is gone.
We want to protect our healthcare system, because they provide a service that is so essential. And hopefully we're not seeing people slip through the cracks that need certain treatments and things like that. I would assume that cancer treatments and things that are not elective are taking place. But what a
Correct.
difficult...
Emergency services are still being provided, and
Right.
emergent surgeries are still being done. Yeah.
Good. Yeah. So, well, moving on to kind of close things off. We've been on here for a long time, and I appreciate everybody's time. Charlene, Princeton says the concept of supply chains has risen in the prominence in dialogues throughout this crisis. What concerns should we be watchful for with potential impacts of our community much further down the road? Sort of a ripple effect, and what can we do as a local community to be more self-sufficient as a local community at a local community level? I think for me, this is creating a opportunity to evaluate priorities and look
Correct.
at things in terms of what do I want versus what do I need, and do I really need that? And so each individual is going to have to evaluate for themselves how much of a certain thing do they want. Is it a mandatory thing at this point, and is it just something that would make me feel better? And supply chain is a whole... I mean, there's a whole industry around supply chain. Truckers
Right.
are hugely valuable.
Uh-huh.
Luckily, our trucking industry hasn't been shut down by this. Walmart's still getting deliveries. Marketplace is still getting deliveries. Manufacturers are still getting important things out
Yep.
of the area, out of our industrial park, and that's super important. If that were to shut down, I think it's like 3 days before all the shelves are empty in a supermarket is kind of the window. We need to evaluate supply chain from how we get things into the store, but also how we get it out of the store. And this is changing the way that we look at things. How do we get groceries? If we're not comfortable going into a grocery store, we go to the pickup line. Well, Walmart did a great job, and Marketplace followed suit with setting that up, but they were not ready for the capacity that people demanded when everybody
Right.
wanted
When you go from 50 pickups a day to 500,
Yeah.
it becomes impossible.
Right.
I actually have a couple thoughts on that. And one, we're fortunate to live in an area, where Kirk and I live, and that there's farms around us. There's dairy that we can essentially buy direct. There's all kinds of meat that you can buy: beef, you can buy hog, you can buy chickens, you can get eggs. I saw Judy Erickson jumped on. We have tremendous apples, and we have local wineries. We have delicious dairy. There's a lot of things that we can get locally here. And if you're wanting to protect your food supply chain, make sure that farmers stay in business locally. That's the number one way that you want to protect it. You don't want to, there's I think this maybe it's just me, but I think a lot of people probably have just in their mind dabbled with kind of the prepper mentality of how much toilet paper should I have on hand at any given time in case it's gone for a month. But really looking at staying local and making sure that those that are producing food, that you're purchasing it from them so they can stay in business. I even think I think of farmers markets opening up in middle or end of May, kind of around here, and making sure that those farmers that are producing stuff that you can eat year round are making sure that it's there. The other thing is you might, in order to do this and totally protect supply chain, you need to be okay with not having thousands of options at your fingertip all the time.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I hope comes out of this is that people will be more content with simpler lives, with less stuff, with more less disposable stuff, more reusable stuff, and just be able to get squared away on that. But that's kind of a pipe dream, I guess, but that's one of my hopes.
Yeah, I think priorities and evaluating your priorities are a big thing. I get a little nervous because our friend Shannon is moving, Donahue's moving, and they are posting everything on Facebook like as fast as they can sell it because they're selling their house. And I don't want my wife to see that because I'm afraid I'm going to come home and there's going to be like furniture in
You'll
the
be
front
nothing
yard.
left. You
Yeah,
see how fast
she'll
stuff
get
is
the
going
bug.
from her little Facebook auctioneering thing, and
Yeah,
it's going to be like
you didn't
it's
need this,
gone.
did you? So it's a lot of priorities. Charlene asked, or she said, I guess I'm thinking about self sufficiency for food supply, etc. How do we all keep farmers going? Oh, I think maybe you answered that. Maybe I got this a little bit late. So um, educate people about their needs at school, parents, churches. Return again to teaching some of those old ways that are
Yeah.
getting lost. Yeah, I think it's priorities and it's looking at things in a different way in not such a consumer mentality that we get when we can buy anything we want on Amazon and have it shipped the next day, and realize that it might be worth waiting and evaluating if we really want to take up that space in our garage. And maybe it's time to
And
clean
I'll
up some
and
things.
let me throw on kind of one more thing, and then we can wrap. But it really we we live in a small town, right?
Yep.
In
And thank goodness we do. I wouldn't want to live
I
in a
know
big town.
no, I do not. I would not either, especially now. And we kind of have it the best of both worlds because it's an hour to the airport from to Minneapolis International Airport. So, um, but I really, an additional positive thing, and I guess I'll wrap with this. An additional positive thing I hope is that people refine a sense of community that I think has slowly been lost as our political affiliations continue to get more divided.
Hmm.
One of the things that I've learned over the projects that I've been involved with over the last 3 years is that just because someone might have a different philosophy on life with you doesn't automatically make them a bad person. In fact, there's a good chance they're an awesome person.
Hmm.
And finding that sense of community where we find the things that we agree on and we focus on those as opposed to the things that we disagree on. Because there's just one thing I'm finding is that being totally bitter, being angry, even being frustrated with staying at home, it doesn't get you anywhere. I'm still going to be at home for the next at least 20 and probably 40 days.
Yep.
That's just reality. So I can be mad about it, I can stew about it, or I can make the best of it. And I'm hopeful that that sense of community, when we can get back together, people will go, you know what? Let's maybe look for the good in each other, the things that we have in common, and not be as polarized as we are right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, and I think our community is very well rounded in that aspect, and we tend to look out for each other. We still are willing to tell our kids to get home if you see a kid messing around, and we're not afraid to be a community in the sense that if you live in where I grew up in St. Paul, they've lost that. We didn't, you wouldn't know your neighbors. You wouldn't necessarily to speak to them. And we still have that to a large degree here. I know most of the people that live within a few blocks of me. But I think that um, as we look at self sufficiency and we look towards the future of how we're going to go from, April 17th forward, there probably will be a good opportunity for us to look at how we can um, build our own self sufficiency, whether it's the way that we look at healthcare, whether it's
Hmm.
how we buy our
Yeah.
food, the types of things that we invest our time and our money into to protect ourselves from this type of thing happening again. Because what I've learned is I don't think I could get into the clinic if I wanted to for something as simple as a physical, or if I had some concern. There's a limited amount of that, and so I'm my own first responder. If I get hurt or my kids get hurt, I'm going to
Right.
try and take care of it as much as I can
Yeah.
before I have to go and expose myself to things. If I had a little bit more land, I'd maybe have a garden that we could produce some of our own food. Um, and if there was a need for protection, um, and luckily we're not in a place where people are banditing or anything like that, but in bigger cities that would be a concern. I would turn to my neighbors and say, let's become a neighborhood watch and make sure that
Right.
we don't have people doing
Yeah.
bad
Stay
things.
safe. Right. Have each
There's
other's back.
you you start to turn inward to that. Now, from the perspective of what do we do now for someone who's hurting and afraid and they maybe lost their job, I'm going to go to Dave Ramsey's principles and I'm going to say, take care of your four walls. Make sure that you are fed, make sure that your kids and your family are taken care of. That if it was, do I pay my mortgage or do I pay my credit card bill? Um, you know, you're going to take care of your four walls. Your credit cards they're going to yell and scream, but you don't want to lose your house. If it's a matter of, are you going to pay your car payment? And like I said, call those people up and say, hey, we've got an issue. I don't have any income, so you're going to have to work with me. It's
Right.
better to take a hit on your credit score than lose your house or not be able to feed your kids. And I used to do financial coaching with Dave Ramsey. I know that people do crazy things and they will choose to pay a screaming credit card bill because they make a lot of noise rather
Right.
than take care of their kids or buy their
Right.
medication because you don't like to get yelled at, and credit card um, people that call about past due credit, they yell at you, and you don't like that. So make wise choices. Take care of your family. Take care of your house. Take care of your mortgage, and sort these things out. And if you need to go get another job or you need to go do something else, don't let pride get in the way. Get in there and
Right.
do it. Last thing I want to say about positivity is I want you to look and ask yourself, who are the 10 people that you've surrounded yourself with? And if you are not surrounded by people who are feeding into your life, and right now we can't surround ourselves with anybody, so it might be, what podcast are
Virtually.
you listening to? Who are you Skyping with, or FaceTiming with? But the 10 most influential people and things around you should be positive. They should be telling you, you can do it. You can build this. You can survive this. If you have negative people in your life that are telling you things that are not helping you, you may need to step away from them for right now, because mental health and taking care of yourself and your family is very important right now. And we've got another 30 to 40 days of this before we're going to get out and get hugs. And I don't know that I'd hug anybody anyway, other than my immediate family. But we have to take care of ourselves. So surround yourself with positive. Read books. Get on podcasts. Listen to positive things on Facebook. And there is this great thing called unfollow. You don't have to unfriend someone. You can just like hide them for 30 days.
Yeah.
And that's a great way to just silence the negativity so that we can move on and be positive. That's all I got for today. I think we
All
covered a
right.
lot. hopefully everybody's doing well. Please, please take care of yourself and be safe out there. Wash your hands, social distance, and hopefully we'll get on the other side of this in a quick way, and we'll get back to some normalcy. All right.
All
Have a
right.
great day, everybody. Thanks, Bill, for hanging out,
Yeah.
and we'll see you guys
See
next
you
time.
next week.